Hey guys, what's up everybody? So today I'm going to be telling stories about my experience that I had in Banos, Ecuador. This one's going to be a little bit different, I feel like, than most because for me Banos was just an incredible place to go to. It was probably the first place I had been to since traveling that I felt like I could go back to and not really miss a beat and really enjoy it just as much the second time around. And I had so many stories to tell from this experience in Banos that I actually think this time I'm really just going to read word for word what I've written in my journal here because I've got about 4.5, 5 pages of writing in my book here, my travel journal. So I guess in the light and in the journey of trying to make all of these memories digital so that other people can experience them and I can have a record of these down the road to share with my family and friends as we continue to go down this life journey. I really wanted to make sure that I had something to share here, so I'm going to just go for it. That this one's a little bit longer than normal, then I guess that just speaks to how much Banos was an special experience for me, and I hope you guys enjoy the stories I'm about to share with you guys. So the moment I stepped off the bus, I knew this place was going to be special. I remember the fresh air and the clean streets, free of sand and debris. The hostel was a bit of a walk from the bus station, but it led me right to the base of the town waterfall. And so I stayed at the Great Backpacker Hostel, and it was only about 2 minutes from the local hot springs where the locals enjoyed their hot, cold shock therapy, and that's something I will talk a lot about here because the shock therapy for me was just a very meaningful experience. So within moments of arriving at the hostel, I met a group of travelers, and off we went to the springs for a relaxing afternoon. And after settling into the hostel, once we returned from the hot, cold therapy springs, we played a few games of pool, and I met Steve, a local traveler who is an ex-U.S. Marine who spent a lot of time in Japan, and we, talked about his stay in Banos and the fact that he was going to be there for a while. So on day 2, Steve and I watched the World Cup of Rugby match. Back then, I have no idea, I remember who was playing, but then I headed to the swing at the end of the world, is what they called it, with Steve. And it was, in my opinion, it was quite underwhelming, but the view was great and the pictures we got were fantastic. The swing just wasn't as exhilarating as I would have liked, but I still enjoyed it greatly. And so on the way down, Steve and I had a great chat about the difference between people who traveled and others who haven't, and the different ways of thinking and approaches of life. This conversation really hit home for me and was really close to my heart because ever since I came back from traveling in Europe, very few people I felt like understood truly where I was coming from and how my life goals had been altered ever so slightly. But that slight deviation at that time, at my very young age, I'm very young still, but at that age I was especially young, make a huge difference in the long run. So that night we headed off to the baths for our traditional night spa cold therapy. And I must say that second night that I went back to those baths where they had this natural hot springs, cold and very hot, I fell in love with the sensation of and health benefits and the strength it takes to do shock therapy is what they called it. I learned that night that I truly enjoyed everything about the experience, most importantly the mental strength it takes to push your body to the limits in these ridiculously hot and cold baths. I find it fascinating that humans have used this therapy for millennia. It's so simple and yet elegant in a way that your body can be tricked and be numbed to its sense of temperature. So it just really opened up the entire world of shock therapy, hot, cold baths, whatever you call that type of therapy for me. And for those of you who know me now, as I am today, I love cold water. I'm kind of a freak of cold water and I really don't get fazed by it. And I think the hot water, I haven't really had a chance to really get into the hot of hot water since this experience in Banos, but I really think that if I went back to Banos, I wouldn't have missed a beat and would love every single moment of it. And so this place in my heart is so special because it's somewhere where I've always been able to come back to and experience something so similar in the cold, canyon waters here in North Vancouver since coming home and really being able to reconnect with that part of me and ground that into me as part of who I am. And the next day, we went on a 20-kilometer bike ride down towards Puyo along a windy highway that was full of waterfalls with 2 other people, Natalie and Miro. And to be completely honest, I wrote Natalie and Miro here and I don't even remember who they are and how they look, and I think just speaks to how many people you meet traveling and how you don't realize that these experiences will impact you on such a great level, but you might not necessarily remember all the fine details of what these experiences are. And so all the scenery down this road was fantastic, and I remember eventually we got to this main waterfall called Diablo, and here we got off our bikes and hiked down into the jungle, in this marvelous jungle, to reach the base of the falls. And once you got to the base of the falls, then we walked up along the ridge of the canyon and down the cliffside, where we walked and turned into like more of a caving experience. So we were walking up and down this ridgeline, and we dropped all the way down into the canyon floor, and eventually we got into this kind of caving experience where we shot out behind the waterfall. And so as I was standing there behind the jungle waterfall, and all I could think about was the sheer power of Mother Nature. I stood there for 10 seconds and I was soaked from head to toe as thousands of liters rushed a couple feet from my body. After the natural shower experience, we hiked back up to our bikes and had a traditional Amerzo lunch, which was, consisted of beans and rice, chicken, salad, and soup. And after lunch, that's when the adventure of this day really took off. So we decided to continue biking for a few more kilometers, and as we reunited with the main highway that we kind of came off of to get down into this canyon, into this waterfall, Miro veered right onto this like awkward gravel path, and as I followed, I kind of lost my balance, and in an attempt to regain my balance, I kind of did a bunny hop over the road gutter. So they have, we in North America, maybe the roads slope in a slightly concave form so that the water just kind of flows off. There it was like that, but then they had these very distinct gutters. So I tried to jump over this gutter, and I fell straight onto the highway, head over heels, and right into the middle of the highway, in this single lane traffic highway. And I quickly got up and got out of the way of oncoming traffic, but the experience brought my adrenaline to a day high as the car that was coming down the road veered around me to avoid a serious accident, like obviously a very serious accident. I would have been hospitalized, arguably dead, if this car hit me as I was lying on the road after I'd fallen off my bike on the side of the road. And we continued biking for another kilometer, and then all of a sudden we started climbing this hill. And as we were climbing this hill, my pedals jammed, and then it was just like boom, snap, pop. The gears snapped off my rear bikes, bringing the biking to an immediate end. So the back gears literally just completely disassembled, the chain cracked, and I just remember it being like, oh my gosh, that's that. Like, we're with 4 other people, and there's nothing we can do about this. One of us has a broken bike, which was me, and so we ended up getting out to the other side of the road, and that's kind of when we knew, we had heard about how to get back to town, was it if you didn't have a chance to bike, which was all going to be 20 kilometers on a gradual uphill, you could just kind of put your thumb out, and there was these guys who would come by in these trucks. So we walked down to the bus stop where we saw this bus stop and threw our thumbs out, and eventually got a lift back to Banos on a flatbed canopy truck, which is what I was talking about there, and very similar kind of to what I would imagine if I was trying to flee a country as a refugee in World War II. And flatbed, green tarped, old ruggedy truck, clicking and clacking away and really just putzing up the hill. And he just threw us in there with his bikes, and we gave him some money, and off we went. And we just hope that these people are going to take you to the right place. And you're like, I know I'm going up road, and I hope you take me as far as I can go. And so in the evening, we returned to our usual bathing and hot, cold therapy again, like every single night pretty much we did this. And we chatted about the adventures of the day and the incredible feeling of shock therapy. The next day I decided to join 2 travelers I met in Mancora that ended up being in the hostel I was staying at, because everyone kind of travels in the same wave on the climbing adventure, and it was the first time exploring this sport, and I must say I have mad respect for all rock climbers. The intense mental and physical strength required to pull and climb your way up a wall harnessed in is exhilarating. After 2 or 3 20-minute climbs, I was exhausted. However, even after the climbing experience, I continued to chat with the other climbers, 3 of which spoke French. So from there, I spoke French with them, and we all quite enjoyed it. And it was then that I realized it would be a shame to lose my ability to speak French, and came to the conclusion that I should read a few French books a year to stay on top of the language. So before I just jump into the French thing, I think this is just hilarious, because now, I came back traveling, and it took me a while to get back into a sport after I stopped playing hockey. But the sport that I have found and I love doing now is rock climbing, and I totally do still hold that same respect for the people that I look up to in the rock climbing community, and the amount of integrity it takes to internal integrity to just, you know, commit to climbing a rock and really giving it your all and being so present with the rock, but also the culture around the rock climbing community, especially here that I've engaged with in North America, has just been so open and welcoming, and an overwhelmingly amazing experience, and how much respect they have for themselves and nature and the whole community as a whole. It's really brought another special part of me to light, and realize that I really like engaging with sports where it's, you know, man versus nature, versus these sports where you're competing against another team. And I think there is definitely something to be said around team sports and what it teaches you at a young age over time. But I think as you mature, it's important to understand the distinction between, you know, being on the best adult safe hockey league team, or being on the best, you know, intramural soccer team, versus, you know, being one of the best rock climbers, or one of the best backcountry skiers, or one of the best trail runners. It's a different competition, because you're no longer competing against your peers, you're competing against yourself and Mother Nature in congruence. And the more you can push that limit, the more you realize and you can respect the forces of life, I think, is really where it comes from. And as far as this French speaking, I just giggle because now that I'm rock climbing a little bit more, I have noticed that, you know, there's a large community of people, or a large portion of people in the rock climbing community that speak French, and I definitely have kept up with that a book a year to stay on top of my French language. But I wouldn't say I am as great as I was at French in the past, but I definitely want to continue reading and speaking French as much as I can. So I just wanted to, I find that fascinating and funny. So after rock climbing, I returned back to the hostel and relaxed for a bit before realizing I hadn't been on a single hike in Banos. So I realized I rallied myself and I headed off to a nice view off the city I'd fallen in love with. Once I hit the base of the trail into the rain, so I'm just reading here, but once I hit the base of the trail, the rain was creeping in, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the rainstorm would hit. So I got to the bottom of this trailhead that I walked across town to get to, and I remember seeing the clouds creeping in. So I headed off with haste up the hill, and almost a light jog. On the way up, I took a few photos, and within 30 minutes I'd reached the official viewpoint at the top. And almost simultaneously, as I hit the top of this mountain, it started to pick up, and the rain just slowly pitter patter, and I started to just like bolt down the hill, because I was wearing, you know, very light sandals, cotton pants, and cotton shirt, and that's all I was wearing, and I had a bottle of water. So I started bolting past people on the way down, and I got back into town right at the bottom of the base of this hill, and it just started to rain like it rains in North Vancouver on the rainiest day. The rainstorms, like the tropical rainstorms, and I was just like absolutely happy. I was completely in a blissful state when I was jogging back from the trailhead all the way back to the hostel in this pouring rain, basically getting showered by earth, and it was just such an amazing experience. I couldn't really speak highly enough of what that sensation is like when you just accept the fact that you're going to get soaking wet and you just continue to do what you do. So again, once everyone had returned from their daily adventures in Banos, we all headed back to the springs to enjoy the sensation of the local culture and talk about the day. So it really became a local, or I guess like a ritual for the people who were staying at this hostel that I definitely played a role in. You know, every night after we'd done all these crazy adventures, because there was so much to do, we would go to this hot springs. So that night when we returned from the baths, a whole plethora of new people had arrived, and we're just mingling with each other amongst everyone else. And so I joined and played some pool with the other travelers and won quite a few games, and decided to retire in the corner and enjoy the rest of my beer with Steve and chat about how the last few days have been going. And after a little while, the whole night changed in a matter of seconds, and my life took a swing into what most would think to be a moment of pure luck. I, however, see it as another pivotal moment in my life. Brennan Sardi, who I am still connected with today, and I hope, Brennan, you're watching this, because it was a really awesome and super cool experience for me to say, was a small man with a scruffy hair and pierced eyes, came up to me as a fellow Canadian, and we started to chat. about typical travel topics until we hit the golden string, the treasure in the sea of people. Brendan worked for Vivint at the time, which was the largest home automation and security company in North America. And at the top of all that, he does sales for them. So we got down to business and I started talking to him about the potential opportunities with the company, and boom, within a split second he said, "Consider yourself in." Now I sit here on my way to Cartagena wondering how many places we could have met. The fact that we met was almost destiny. It seemed so much like my introduction to college pro, but instead of the right or left that I took in math class, which is a story that I will eventually tell, it was a north and south on my travels that had led me to a new golden door. I could barely sleep that night, and I just lied in their frantic thought about the marvelous connection I had just made. The next day I slept in and I did the same course. I slipped in and did some course research for the enrollment that I was going to be doing, because I was actually going to be going back to school in the new year. And I did my same meditation routine. Then I organized a group of us to go canyoning in the afternoon, which included Brennan, Alex, Tamina, and Steve Ryan. Different Steve than the Steve that I was hanging out with before. This canyoning experience opened my eyes to the radical and wild adventures that life could take you on. Not even 24 hours prior, I didn't know any of these people, and here I was, abseiling down waterfalls led by two guys our age. So I guess in retrospect, the Vivint position and that entire business opportunity wasn't really what ended up coming to light, and I didn't end up engaging with that organization at all, and I had some realizations once I got home around what I really wanted to do, but it was just absolutely mind-boggling. This experience of abseiling and canyoning down these waterfalls with, like I said, two guys. They were 24, 26. They were in their 20s, and they were leading us, a group of other 20s, early 30-year-olds, down this water canyon fall